Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's topic, fraud analytics at work. So we have with us Mr. Deepji Singhal today, who's the advisor at Sama Audit Systems and Software Private Limited. He'll be taking us through the practical case studies related to the methodology. And also we have with us Mr. Jairam Rajshekhar. He's the Director Client Relations at Sama Audit Systems and Software Private Limited. So he will be taking us through the demonstration of the practical case study through an analytical tool solution. So in case if you have any questions, all the queries will be taken care at the end of the session. We have a toolbox for the question. You can simply drop in your chats there. Thank you so much. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mehnaz. Good afternoon to all of you. I'm Deepji Singhal, and I'll do the first part. I'll take in around half an hour, 40 minutes of your time, going through how to, and then we see practical case studies, being demonstrated by Jairam. Two thoughts very quickly. First is, let me thank Akhilesh Thakur from the President IIA India Bombay chapter, and of course then Mehnaz, the coordinator who made all this happen today, along with other volunteer leaders of IIA India Bombay chapter. Now, when we were putting together this presentation 3 days back, we said fraud analytics at work, and we put together a very lovely presentation. It was full of technical jargon and a lot of charts and a lot of graphs and a lot of things, ideas that we packed in. We reviewed that. Jairam and I reviewed that presentation and said, we do not want to make that presentation. What we want to do is a very simple presentation. So today we removed all that, and today we have made another presentation for all of you, which is a very simple presentation. On first is just a few warm-up slides, and then quickly getting into, if we are internal auditors, how would we apply analytics to fraud analytics arena, and that's what is the takeaway from today's session. If after listening to this session, do I have one or two thoughts more which I can go back and apply in my work area, and then we would feel, Jairam and I would feel that we have done a good job about this presentation. That's the first thought, which we have packed in. And the second thought is that whenever I was speaking to an audience physically prior to April, you could actually look at the body language and you could connect with people, and you could change the way you are speaking or what the thoughts are which are flowing, because you could adjust to the receptivity and the perception of the audience. Now, basically, I'm just speaking to a computer. So whatever I've thought, I'm going to speak, because that's the way it will work in today's situation. Okay, so now today's presentation, fraud analytics at work. Next, please, Jairam. Now, what's the premise for today's presentation? One is that fraud is increasing. It is a major challenge to governance, which organizations are facing in whatever the size, industry, location. And even today, many organizations are disinclined to report on fraud. But though they may be disinclined to report on fraud, it is necessary to prevent and detect it. Now, again, it is not the internal auditor's main responsibility to detect fraud or to uncover fraud, but there are a number of tools, tests, and processes which can be utilized to detect them, and an internal auditor should be using that entire toolkit to work in that direction. And data analytics increases the chances that fraud may be uncovered. Now, before I get into what is the role of internal auditors to report on fraud as per the pronouncements of IIA, let me give you the regulatory backdrop in India on what's happening. In the last 2 years, we have seen that the statutory auditor, the companies have been entrusted that they report any fraud or wrongdoing to the audit committee, to the board, and it also should be reported to the statutory auditor. If it crosses a certain threshold, then it has to be reported to the central government. The statutory auditor in turn has to build fraud analytics or methodology to ensure in their audit test that they detect or report any red flags or frauds which are uncovered in the organization, and they in turn look to the internal auditor, whether there is an in-house internal auditor or an outsourced one. They look to the internal auditor's program to actually ask what steps the internal auditor has taken to build fraud prevention and detection in their audit programs. So I think that last 2 years we have seen that happen. Then again, if you keep the regulatory aspects to the side, the stakeholders, if you talk about the promoter owners, owner promoters, or professional organization CEOs, or the audit committee, then I think nobody wants surprises in organizations. So when they're looking at an organization and they find surprises, I think they always look up to the internal auditor to say, did you look at that area? What work did you carry out? What was your audit universe? Why it was not picked out earlier? And what went wrong? So I think again, the responsibility on the internal auditor is increasing. Just 2 days back, SEBI has come out with the regulation in terms of a reward for whistleblowers. They have announced that, if a whistleblower is reporting any fraud and 10% of the amount of that fraud, whatever magnitude is there, or 1 crore, whichever is higher, to the would be the cash prize to the owner, to the whistleblower per se. Now, if you look at all these pronouncements, what's happening is that the government is making it more and more difficult by bringing in more and more regulation to demonstrate what wrong is happening, so that it acts as a deterrent to other organizations per se. But all this is having a pressure on the internal auditor in the organization to ensure that the area which is looked up and the processes which they actually carry out audit, there's no wrongdoing in those areas. And today, with the data explosion and data driven audit, it would not be possible for any internal auditor to build anti-fraud programs, prevention and detection programs, without using fraud analytics. So I think that's the background. And the Institute of Internal Auditors has come out with a pronouncement on fraud, which is 3 things. The first is they're talking about the competence per se in the professional practices framework. So they're talking about internal auditors must have sufficient knowledge to evaluate the risk of fraud and the manner in which it is managed by the organization. So it is talking about knowledge on the part of the internal auditor, which is competence and skill. Next. The second is, it is talking about internal auditors should consider where fraud risk is present within your business and respond appropriately by auditing the controls of that area, evaluating the potential for the occurrence of fraud, and how the organization manages fraud risk through risk assessment and audit planning. So this is work carried out by the internal auditor per se. And third, the institute in their pronouncement, Institute of Internal Auditors in their pronouncement is making a disclaimer, which they're saying, okay, it is not internal auditor's direct responsibility to prevent fraud happening within the business. This is the responsibility of management as the first line of defense. So I think 3 things IAA professional practices framework is laying out. One is the skill competence on the part of the internal auditor to develop and have the knowledge to have fraud analytics or fraud prevention programs and look at the processes in that light. Number 2 is carrying out the work, how they'll carry out the work. And the third is that it is not primary responsibility, but more and more pressure on the internal auditors, as we see in the practical life in companies, in organizations per se. Now, what is the IAS perspective to internal auditors and fraud? Now, we have picked this out from different pronouncements by IAA on fraud. What they have given out is identify red flags indicating fraud may have been committed. That's the first thing. Understand the characteristics of fraud and the techniques used to commit fraud and the various fraud schemes and scenarios. Evaluate the indicators of fraud and decide whether further action is necessary or whether an investigation should be recommended. And evaluate the effectiveness of controls to prevent or detect fraud. Now, this is in short picked out from various literature of IAA, what is expected of the internal auditor per se. Now, if you look at all these pronouncements, I think it becomes amply clear that in today's world, without analytics, without data analytics, without fraud analytics, it will be very difficult for any internal audit setup, whether in-house or outsourced, to really carry out any effective evaluation of controls or find red flags in the areas where you are going to do audits and so on. Now, let's just step back and say, what is forensic accounting? I've put down what is forensic accounting in this area, in this slide. It is a specialty practice area where accounting, auditing, and investigative skills are used to analyze information that is suitable for use in a court of law. Now, I'll just digress and say, in India, Institute of Chartered Accountants of India has recently come out with exposure drafts on forensic accounting and investigation standards, investigative standards, FAIS. Now, they will be, I think, converted into standards which will be mandatory for chartered accountants from December onwards or January onwards. Uh, I think people are commenting on it right now. They have laid it out for people to comment on it. So I think it is unique because such a lot of emphasis is being given to forensic accounting per se and investigation standards, or investigation which is going on. Now, who are forensic accountants? Forensic accountants are often engaged to quantify damages in instances related to fraud and embezzlement, as well as on matters involving insurance, personal injury, business disputes, business interruption, divorce and marital disputes, construction, environmental damages, cybercrime, products liability, business valuation, and more. So now it's a whole vast area, but the sum and substance is that there's a lot of importance given to these areas. The regulators are driving it. The stakeholders want this. So the internal auditors will have to perform and get into this area. I am going to skip fraud investigation. You can read this later on as the slides will be distributed to all of you, given out to all of you. What is fraud analytics? Fraud analytics is an integral part of fraud investigation. Now, fraud analytics combines analytic technology and techniques with human interaction to help detect potential improper transactions such as those based on fraud and or bribery, either before the transactions are completed or as they occur. Now, it is very important. So fraud analytics will enable you to detect either before the transaction are completed, so there may be red flags, or as they occur, so in real time as they are occurring. So I think there's a good chance that you can use fraud analytics to minimize the damage for an organization as much as possible. Now, what are the key reasons for using forensic data analysis tools? Early fraud detection, number one. Ability to detect fraud that we could not detect before. Manually, it would not be possible, or with just Excel sheets, it will not be possible. You have to take the entire gamut, entire universe to run the data to ensure that you look at red flags. Faster response in investigations, increased business transparency, getting the business to take more responsibility for managing the company's anti-fraud program. What can happen is, as auditors carry out their audit tests, they build fraud analytic programs. What we have seen is that usually if you work closely with the process owner, and if there is a real value add to the organization, there is transfer of knowledge from the auditor, the internal auditor, to the process owner per se in any good organization. So what happens is, we have seen that happen in number of organizations, that departments like procurement, or in multi-geography large organization departments like procurement, or even production departments where we have worked, they have said, okay, how did you look at those tests and how did you detect the red flags, or what went wrong? How are you getting all these deviations? And why don't you transfer the skills so that we can run the test ourselves? So what has happened is that you actually transfer the skills of fraud analytics to the department per se. They run their own tests and you graduate to the next level. The internal auditor graduates to the next level in terms of doing something more. So I think we have seen that happening. Now, before I get into this slide, from here on, it's only practical case studies. So I'll just step back from these slides and I'll speak to you about practical experiences and how an internal auditor would go about looking at data in an organization to build fraud analytics in their work area, which you cannot escape from in today's era, in today's world. Now, if I step back as a outsourced internal auditor or as an in-house internal auditor in a company and say, I am looking at procurement, or I'm looking at production, or I'm looking in an IT company, maybe I'm looking at resourcing, or I am looking at in a hospital, a function in a hospital area, or a pharmacy, or maybe a port operation, any area where we are going out and doing internal auditing, conducting internal auditing. I think what is important is that first of all, there's a planning which is happening. You have the universe. I think what is important in this case is, first of all, I'm assuming here that the auditor has business knowledge of the operation that they are working in, business knowledge of the organization that you're working in. If it's a pharmaceutical company, you have knowledge about critical aspects of running a pharmaceutical business. If it's a port operation, then you know how a container freight station works, or how a ICD works, inland container depot works, or if it's a shipping operation, how a shipping line works. If it's a cargo operation, how that cargo operation works. If it's a hospital, how does a hospital work? So I am assuming that an internal auditor has knowledge about the business processes, has knowledge about the critical aspects of the business that he or she is auditing. And then what you're doing is you're looking at the entire year's program, and then you're saying which is the high risk audit areas. So as you get in, you can actually use an audit tool. I think maybe Jairam will demonstrate that to you in today's session. How can you actually identify high risk audit areas using an analytical tool? That's number one. Number two is, once you've done that, you have data available, then you use that data and flow that data through discover feature. Like today we're talking about idea to show the solution. You can use any solution, but okay, today we're talking about the idea data analysis software, to use that as an analytical tool. Now if you use that analytics tool, then you use a discover feature and you can actually flow the data. And I think Jairam will again demonstrate to you how you can look at the behavior of the data, the pattern of data, how the data is behaving either week on week, quarterly, yearly. And you can say, you can drill down to areas where you feel there's anomalies. You can look at the numbers. You can build your own dashboards. Some dashboards are coming in pre-built, based on the pre-built intelligence of the tool. And then you can build your own dashboards based on your own business knowledge of the data which is available, and look at data. And then once you have patterns, then you can get into areas like correlation maybe. So I can give you examples of correlation, that overtime in production, you may look at overtime. If overtime increases, there should be increase in production, unless and until, of course, overtime is related to a maintenance department area, and during shutdown, maintenance is giving overtime to ensure that the plant maintenance is carried out. So that would be investigated further by the internal auditor and would be known once you analyze the data. So basically you look at correlation to see how do two variables behave, how do they move. Either both have to move positively, or one has to move up and other has to go down, and so on. So how does, based on the business, how does those 2 or 3 variables move? And then again, you can look at patterns of data and the correlation techniques which are there. Then you can look at Benford's law for fraud evaluation. You can look at the graphs and charts which come along with the discover function and the patterns which are there. For procurement test, you can specifically look at, if you're looking at vendors, you can look at the fuzzy logic. You can actually flow in the entire general ledger, upload it in the analytical tool, and look at outliers for a general ledger. So you can then focus on, through machine learning, the tool will tell you, okay, this is the outliers, do you focus here? So the internal auditor can focus there, and you can have red flags there, and you can then drill down and say, why is data behaving like this? Why is this an outlier? And when you're doing all these things, you're planning, you are running the data through tools, you are looking at patterns, you are looking at outliers, you are looking at dashboards, you can actually then drill down and say, this is, as an internal auditor, this is what I want to focus on. And then you can, of course, as I've given procure to pay, there are 3 slides. I don't want to read each sentence, but there are 3 slides where we have put down 25 or 30 objectives, which are audit tests. So if you have a procure to pay, you can say, analyze by period to determine seasonal fluctuations. You can say, report on purchasing performance by location. You can say, track scheduled receipt dates versus actual receipt dates. Identify price increases, vis-a-vis geographical location. Or maybe same vendor is giving material at different, same vendor is giving material at different locations at different prices for the same material. Or maybe different vendors are giving material at different prices to different locations. So you can actually analyze and build your audit tests, further build audit tests, and those audit tests can be again done at a central location, or you just, by accessing data, source data, you can actually run those deviations and then ask the process owner why this is happening. And in all these situations, whatever red flags are jutting out, then you can decide whether you would like to go to the management, or you would like to deal with the process owner themselves, because it's a smaller issue, not a material issue. There's no integrity issue, so you can actually talk to the process owners. If there is an integrity issue, you would like to escalate it to top management. Do you have the necessary forensic wherewithal so that your team can handle it, or you would like to escalate it to top management so they can outsource it to give to another set of people who have the necessary forensic skills to further explore this or further get into this once something is established. So uh, the rest of the slides, uh, I don't want to get into each one of those, but I've just taken examples, three slides of procure to pay. Again, there are some data analysis for fraud investigators. You are saying splitting versus approved limits, skimming below approval limits, identifying high risk audit units, detecting bogus or fictitious entries, pattern matching to isolate fuzzy duplicates, anti-bribery and corruption tests, related party transaction and unauthorized arrangements. So I think you can just go on writing more, as many audit tests as you want. You can just go on writing your scheme of things and then what audit tests are there, and based on the business you can write your own audit tests and build it. Now, to cut this short, what I want to tell you is that at the planning stage, at the beginning, today analytics plays a very important role for an internal auditor, and fraud analytics or anti-fraud programs can be built into your audit plan at the planning stage, during your field work, before your field work, during your field work, and at the time of reporting. And an institutionalized tool or methodology to work with data would help the internal auditor go a long way into building this, because there is an increased awareness by regulators, by stakeholders, and internal auditors necessarily have to build in all these in their plans. We have already been doing this, but it has to be done more meticulously, better, and all the evidence have to be stored, because I think that is what the internal auditors would be reporting later on. If something goes wrong in their area, then they'll say, what did you look at? How did you look at it? Now, what I'll do is, all the other areas, the slides which are there, we have prepared a slide deck which has all other areas in terms of discover, identifying patterns, correlation, fuzzy logic, Banford's law, outliers. This entire slide deck, I would request Mehnaz, maybe she can just put it up on the portal, or so that it is available to each one of you, or send it out to all of you, or if you write into us, we can send it out to you. So with that, I think I'll stop here and I'll request Jairam to take you through 5, 6, or whatever time permits in the next 1.5 hours. He can show you 6 or 7 good case studies how a fraud analytics test could be used using a solution, using a tool. Jairam.
Thank you, Deepti sir. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this online webinar of Institute of Internal Auditors Bombay chapter on fraud analytics at work. Friends, before I start off, there are a lot of exciting case studies which I have arranged for the demonstration today using IDEA software. But before I jump into that, I just wanted to give a small context to the my part of the presentation. I remember about a year back, we were doing a project for the Economic Offences Wing in New Delhi. And this is interesting because this story or this anecdote would probably signify to you the need for fraud analytics. And I remember they were investigating a particular unit which had about 27 bank accounts, and they were going back from 2019 till 2008, which is almost 11 years. And they had, so if you do the math, 11 into 27, close to about 295, 300 bank accounts, and each bank account had a few hundred pages. All they wanted to do was review the cash transactions in these accounts. And I remember at that time, for want of analytic tools and technologies, I remember they were actually doing it manually. And I just said to myself, this is so ineffective and inefficient, because it would take almost a month plus to just review these statements for cash entries. And all that had to be done was the bank account statement without a password in a PDF file format had to be provided to an analyst using any data analytic tool. I remember we used IDEA and we converted the PDF file. You won't believe it. 27 bank account statements, 11 years. By the end of the day, we had quantified the cash deposits and withdrawals year-wise and given it to the authority. Something which would take weeks at an end, with multiple agencies being involved, was done in a day. all thanks to data analytic tools and fraud analytic tools. So I thought I'd put it out there that that is the power of fraud analytics. And it wasn't a very complicated activity. It was just tracking cash deposits and withdrawals. But the fact that we were dealing with so much of data made fraud analytics all the more essential and important. The other very important matter which I wanted to bring up is a lot is said about the ability of analytics to prevent frauds. I don't want to get into that discussion, but what I do want to talk about is something called latency. If you read a lot of white papers and research articles on the internet, they use this word latency, where they talk about what is the detection time for a fraud, how many days has it taken. The ACFE, Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, say that it almost takes close to about 400 plus days to detect a fraud, at which time almost 85 to 90% of proceeds are irrecoverable. Now, where does data analytics come into the picture here? What I understand is, from various readings, is the latency period is what is minimized. If it takes, say, 400 days to detect a fraud, without using a data analytical, with a data analytical tool, you're going to bring it down substantially. Or if you're employing continuous auditing, or maybe even repetitive analytics, which is a stage prior to that, you could probably track a fraud nearest to the business event. So if you're going to be making a vendor payment tomorrow for a bill booked today, you could run a duplicate check in an analytic tool and ensure that before the duplicate goes out tomorrow, you are capturing the duplicate. So these were just two kind of analogies I wanted to put out there before I start my presentation. Now, for my demonstration, friends, I want to link a lot of these case studies to what Mr. Deepji Singhal mentioned in his slides, because there were very important, impactful points there. We all understand that as a fraud analytical tool, and I'm using IDEA specifically here from Caseware IDEA Canada, we can use it in financial analytics and operational analytics, in maybe customer metric analytics. But I want to start off my session today with an area I've always wanted to do in earlier webinars, but I fall short of doing it, and that is in IT security and control. How can we use fraud analytics? How can we use a data analytical tool in fraud analytics and control in IT from an IT security and control point of view? And to that end, I have with me a web log, or we can call it a firewall log, which basically tracks various movements on the internet. It leaves, to check for, let's say, prohibited website access. So finally, what we want to detect here is prohibited website access, but we want to do it with a file which is rather scary looking. It's not very easy to import, it's not very easily to format, and these are weblog files. So let me just show you the file first to give you a sense of what we are dealing with. So I'm going to begin my first case study and activity today by importing a file, friends. And let's just give it a minute. Yep, it's starting up. I'll make sure I'll go slow so that you can see my screens as and when the case study is happening. So the file is basically a print report. It's a weblog file. And let me make sure I'm selecting it correctly. So I have a couple of files on my computer. And you can actually see that the file is actually opened up. So the first thing which catches your attention here is more than the application. What we want to do as the end game, the real challenge here is, when I look at this file, I don't have any header references for the fields. I notice the fields are not structured, they are not columnar. So the biggest challenge I face from an IT security point of view is when I'm dealing with log files, and they could be any log files. How do I first get something which is as unformatted and as messy as this into something which I can analyze? So you need to be using a tool, friends, which has the capability to take a very unconverted, unformatted file and convert it first into a formatted flat file in rows and columns, which I can then make sense of. So now, if you actually see this, the first field is the IP address, then I've got the date, I've got the time, I've got the request ID, and I've got the website details following thereafter. So you'll see something interesting now. If I go about selecting the data here, and allow me some time to just show this to you, because I wanted to actually demonstrate this to you in the webinar today. I'm actually applying a mask at the top, and I'm selecting the IP address and the date along with the time. Now, the first thing all of you will notice at your end is while you are making the selection at a symmetrical level, the values are not getting picked up. You're not getting the date time, you're not getting the IP address. It's not getting picked up correctly. And that's because the file follows a zigzag pattern. So these are burning issues. These are challenges where typically like a professional services firm will say, oh, look here, we cannot do it. Let's pass it off. And then that area goes unmonitored. What you can do is, let me show you a workaround. You can actually select the first access to a particular site. But rather than create a standard layer, we have the capability where we can create what we call as a floating layer. This is a specialty within IDEA. So we select create a floating layer, and it's to be used where your fields actually dance around. They don't have a uniform starting point and ending point, as you can see in this data. And now what I'm going to do is, after I select the floating layer, I apply the mask on the IP address. So all good. And I now select the IP address. I select the date. I select the time. And you notice that, oh, the problem still remains, but not quite. All you need to do is, you notice that there's a special character between the IP address and the date. All you do is apply the special character there, and you can see the selection actually moves according to your zigzag pattern. It actually mimics the starting and ending point of a field. I remove it and it goes back to its original shape. So this is a very nice feature, and I wanted to take a couple of minutes talking about it, even though it's not directly related to fraud analytics, but it will help you gauge what capabilities the tool should have when working with messy and formatted data. So now let me just complete this, friends. Let me just pick up the data. So give me a few minutes to pick up the information. So the IP address is the first field, then the date of access is the next field, the time of access is the third field, and I also need the, give me a minute, this is something which I need to pick up. I'm not sure if I'm getting it right. Let's see. So I basically need the website details. So let me just type website, and okay, so I'm actually picking up some of the website related details. There's a way in which you can truncate that too, but don't worry about that. You've seen it with the date and time. Now I am actually saving this activity, and I'm going to convert this file into a database, which is what I finally want. So I am going to be importing the data, and it creates a template. So the good thing news is that if you have to work with these log files repetitively, these templates will help you make the activity repeatable. That's the advantage. So I'm going to save the template, and I click on finish. And you can see that the data is getting imported. Oops, sorry about that. Just give me a minute. I think I made one mistake. So in a way, it's good this happened because it allows me to correct the activity. I can actually edit the work done. Now, the reason this happened is because the field was actually taken in a numeric format, whereas it's a character field, I believe. Let me just check it out. Yeah, that was the reason. So you can see something as insignificant as choosing it as a text field can also cause such a big problem. But the good news is you have suitable remediation options available, and then you can resave the template and you can get the data in once again. I hope I get the portal, the IP address once again. And yes, so I've got the website details. I know it looks rather messy there, but there is a way in which we can actually capture the website details correctly. And now to come down to the actual application of the fraud analytic case study, we have the IP address, the date, the time, and the website details. Now, if you want to look at, let's say, out of office hour access or access on Saturdays, Sundays, that's very easy because you can actually go to the field statistics here on the right-hand side, and you can get the statistics at the click of a button. This is a very, very useful feature. So when you're looking at transactions on a Saturday or a Sunday or a public holiday, you can do that. So you actually see here that if you look at the date statistics, there's 1,468 internet accesses on a Saturday and 1,293 on a Sunday from a work network to a public URL. And that's a concern, right? That is a red flag. And what's nice is not only does it give you the count, you can click on 1,293 and it displays which are the access entries on a Sunday, which I can save. And this becomes an annexure of mine when I'm doing an IT audit. So I can call this Sunday access report, right? So it's very easy for me to take the entire weblog dump and interrogate it and cull out Sunday accesses very separately. So one thing which you noticed is it's easy for us to identify entries on a Saturday, Sunday, but what is also nice is if you go to the timestamp, in the timestamp, you can also look at entries which are, let's say, before or after a particular clock. So let's say if they have a 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. kind of a server setting, you can look at entries which are before 6 a.m. and after 6 p.m. And these also can be drilled down and you can study it. So very interesting. Without getting into much analytics, you just bam, hit the field statistics and you get a lot of these indicators up on your screen. Now, what is very nice is if I want to look at prohibited website access right now, so I have the website field, which has a number of URLs there, and I want to identify, let's say, access to prohibited websites. So if containing, say, poker or gambling or any other site, I just simply, IDEA has over 100 plus ready to use audit fraud investigation feature utilities. So I just simply go to search. This operates pretty much like the Google search we have on the internet. I click on search and I just simply need to enter in the search box here, look for, let's say, POKER, poker. And I'm also going to say GAMBL, and I'm using gamble rather than because you could get gambler, gambling. You can get all the derivatives by just entering GAMBL. And you can see I'm putting the star before and after the words, which in a way work like wildcards. So the advantage is it will look for these words in a construction of words, in a sequence of words. And I can look for any number of prohibited website references in the field website. You can see that I've checked the field website and I can extract this into another file and this becomes another annexure. So you can see once you have access to these logs, you can actually do online IT security control reviews very, very easily. Albeit they may be some of the basic general operating controls, but they would be very easy and save a lot of your time. So I'm going to call this, let's say, prohibited website access and click on OK. And let's see if we get something. I had made some changes to the data I remember before the demonstration. And you can see we've got two cases of Galleria Gamble and Gallerian Poker.it. So this is how you can interrogate files. So the learnings from this case study is the file could be messy, the file could be unformatted, but you can still mine it into a formatted row and column set with an idea and then apply a free text search on the data with any fields of your choice. So that's the first case study I wanted to take up, friends, and I hope you all are liking the first case study. I am displaying the erroneous file on the screen just to kind of reiterate that you will make mistakes while working with live data. As I made this, right, I did not set the field for the website to character, but there are inbuilt validators available which ensure you do not go ahead with the unintended mistake and you can debug it very easily. So that's a very useful feature within the tool through a rerun task. Now, that was my case study on IT security and control. Lots of exciting case studies yet to come. Now, friends, I wanted to talk about a very, very interesting and important development and idea, which is as recent as a year to a year and a half back. Whenever I have been using analytics for some time now, and I remember that when I would bring a file into IDEA, I would always look to the audit checklist or look to the requirement definition listing as to what should be done on the file. And I realized that that requires a lot of ability to storytell, visualize, think out of the box, innovate. Now, if you don't have that kind of scheme within you and you want the software to speak to you and give you certain alerts, you want the software to do certain initial thinking for you, How is that possible? And how is that possible from a forensic point of view? So what we're referring to is the ability for a tool to discover certain hidden patterns, outliers, insights, anomalies in the data. Now, to that end, let me import a spreadsheet, which is like a revenue dump, like a sales register. And I'm taking very simple files, okay? Because here we're not looking at getting caught up with complex live data, but I'm taking simple files where we can all relate to the case studies from our respective audit experience. So now this is a sales register, and let me just maximize the view so all of you can see it. Now the fields we have in the data, friends, are your classic sales register fields. You've got the bill number, the bill date, the sales rep number, customer number, product code, unit price, sales before tax, sales tax, and sales plus tax. So now these are the fields which are there in the data. Now, I'm sure each one of us, based on our experience, we'll have our gray cells clicking up there, and we'll think of, okay, am I looking at a sale which is like an unauthorized sale above the credit limit, or I'm looking at a sale by an agent for a product he should not be dealing in, or to a customer to whom he should not be selling. So these are things which come through the audit checklist. But can I have the tool give me certain impressions on the data? And to that end, we have a very interesting feature called Discover. So now what Discover allows you to do is uses pre-built analytic intelligence and gives you certain starting, call it, let's say, exceptions, anomalies, starting points to work with. So you click on Discover, and it, depending on the size of data, it may take anything from a couple of seconds to a few minutes. You can see it's processing in the background. But what it is actually doing is it's running these algorithms on the data. It's very interesting. And you can see these algorithms are actually coming up. And what it does is it gives us a very interesting display into various facets in the data. It's very interesting. So you can actually see here that one thing which is coming up is it's actually showing you that there are 3 duplicates in the data. You can see that. Now, if you were actually to do this, you would need to know how to run the duplicate command. So here what's happening is it's giving you the duplicates automatically. Let me just go back there. Give me a minute, sorry. Let me go back to the home screen. So you can actually see here that it's showing us 3 duplicates on the data, and it's duplicates on the invoice number. Now this is very interesting. It's showing us a 1 0 value sale, 1 negative sale. It's showing us certain billing entries which are appearing in the red color in dashboard number 1. Why are they in red color? Because those are outliers. Those are high value sale entries. And these impressions which you get on the data, if you did not have the Discover feature, for you to actually build it from scratch on your own would require immense amount of training and time. And we want to start using the tool really quickly. So this gives you a startup. This kind of is like a segue where you just get into those results and findings right away. So you can click here on the 3 duplicates on the invoice number, and it's really cool. It shows you which are the duplicates. So you're doing a ledger scrutiny, you're doing a sales audit, and you want to get those early wins. You want to get those low-hanging fruits right away. Take it to your supervisor so that he or she is happy with the work you're doing in the very first few hours of your audit. Use the Discover. Very useful. And it kind of precludes the need for you to start from bottom top. Like you start at a top level, you start with the file, hit the Discover button, and then work your way down to those low hanging fruits. So it's very interesting. And why I am a firm advocate, and I'm a firm I really like this feature which Caseware has put into IDEA, is because it's not static, it's dynamic. So if you want to actually change the dashboards, you want to kind of based on your knowledge of the data, you want to kind of play around with the data, you can do that. These are dynamic visual representations. So if you actually look at the second dashboard here, which shows agent 108 is appearing in red color. And why is that? Because agent 108 has made the highest sale. Now at this stage, if you want to kind of, scoot across and look at top product or top customer or top channel or top location, you don't need to go and reprogram the whole thing, which normally happens when you're using, other IT products. All you need to do is click on the settings here. Okay, it's as easy as that. That opens up the dashboard panel. Okay, and in the dashboard panel, you can see everything is as clear as day there. You have group by sales rep number, which is by default the field on which you are doing the analysis. You can change it from the sales rep number to, let's say, product code. And instantaneously, it shows you that product code 06 has the highest concentration of sale. But it's very interesting. It's the highest concentration of sale by count. Look at that. Now, if I replace the count with, let's say, value, you can see the story changes now. Okay, so let's just give it a minute. And so it's still showing product code 6. I think there's some way I could do that. Oh, I think it's up here. Give me a minute. Count. Okay, I was to do that. Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah. So if you actually do an analysis on quantity, the preferred product in the entire sales file is product code 5. Now that could be that could give away certain tells, but if you actually change it from count to sum, you'll notice that the risk color, that's the red color, moves from product code 5 to 6. And this is a very, very nice feature which allows you to profile the data, look at outliers very easy. Now take, for example, the first dashboard, and I know I'm spending about probably a minute more on this. If I want to do any bucket analysis, okay, I can do that using like a bucket-based pivot or a stratification or a frequency distribution. But what I need to do, imagine you're doing a bucketing in Excel, okay, and you need to create the buckets. The first thing you need to ask yourself, what should be the buckets? Now, how do you determine what the buckets are? You're going to use your own intuition. Here, the buckets are created not intuitively, but scientifically by the tool, because it studies the data. It looks at the values, it looks at the arithmetical average, it looks at the minima, the maxima, and it creates the buckets. And once it creates the buckets, friends, it then tells you that, look here, these are the buckets which we scientifically feel would be the logical buckets, but there are certain sale entries which are in the high value bucket. Look at that. You can see that. And this again, friends, can be further studied. So it helps you identify outliers very easily, something which would take a lot of effort when you're doing it, let's say, through a pivot-based bucket in Excel. So the Discover feature is very useful. You can save it and create it as your preferred dashboard. Now, let's move on. What we've looked at so far is we've looked at how we can apply IDEA from an IT security and control on a weblog file and study prohibited website access, accesses on Saturday, Sundays, out of office hour access. And then we've looked at how we can use pre-built analytic intelligence through Discover to get certain ready-made insights on a revenue dump. Now a question which comes up is, let's say I'm a company which has multiple operating units. And I'm continuing with the sales case study because I love to talk about revenue and revenue related expenses. Let's say there are multiple branches, multiple channels, multiple agencies, and you want to study, let's say, sales and advertising, right? Now, it's very a natural corollary that if your online advertising is on a rise, the footfalls should also be on a rise. Thereby, the revenue through online ads should also be on a rise. And the same thing applies in the physical medium too. If you're advertising more in a certain city for a certain product, you should have more sales there. So now the case study which we're going to be taking up now gives us an opportunity to study sales and advertising branch-wise, product-wise, to look at centers where advertising is going up, but sales are coming down. And that is a red flag because, as Mr. Singhal mentioned, these are collinear variables. Advertising and sales have to move in the same direction. So now let me get the data in, and then I'm going to demonstrate the case study to you using correlation, which is a very interesting feature. So this is again an Excel file, and I am choosing the correlation sales and advertising data. which is some sample data I have with me. Now, you'll notice here, friends, that I have two files. I have the advertising file and I have the sales file. Now, I'm going to be importing both the files into IDEA. Okay, so let's give it its time. Let me display both the files on the screen. So that is the file with advertising spends, and the other file is the file with sales related entries. So take a look at the data, friends. We've got the product market combination, which is product A, market B. So that's the center which we are monitoring. We've got the week of the year. And in file number 1, we've got the ad spends in the file at the top. And in the file at the bottom, we've got the sales in units. Now, this is what I meant. This is what I mean as the collinear relationship between the two files, right? Now, whenever you're doing a correlation and you're trying to identify certain high risk audit units, you need to have two dependent files or two dependent data points which can be correlated together or which bear some form of a semblance or relationship together. It could be, as Mr. Singhal mentioned, overtime and production. It could be, if you're looking at a hospital, you could look at OPD revenue versus patients coming in. So these are classic areas where correlation can be used to check for high risk audit units. Okay, now before we actually derive the score, the correlation score, which would tell us whether the unit is actually a high risk audit unit or not, you first need to prepare the data to apply the correlation. Okay, now just give me a minute, please. There's some problem with my PC. I'm just getting it sorted out. Yeah, I think it's almost done. Yes, perfect. So the first thing I do is I am going to bring the data together in a single file. So just like how we do a VLOOKUP in Excel, friends, we have a join command here in IDEA which allows you to prepare the data, bring the data into a single file for analysis. So I am going to link the two files. You can see that I'm linking it on the product market combination, which is basically the audit unit field. I'm also linking it on the week of the year, okay, which is the time period. So the time period may vary from day to week to quarter to month, depending on the variables you're correlating. And I'm going to be bringing the data together in a single file. So you can actually see here, friends, you need to first prepare the data where the data comes together in a single file. So you'll notice here that we've got the product market combination, the week, the ad spends, and the sale in units, all in a single file. Now, you can visualize, depending on your industry, you can look at examples like, let's say, production and overtime. You can look at, let's say, if you're an IT services company, you could look at manpower project-wise, month-wise, project revenue, and manpower costs. So you can also, both the variables need not be financial values. You could correlate, let's say, rainfall with tea production. So it's very interesting. Now I have the data here, and my objective is to identify high risk audit units in the data. So I could have a few hundred audit units like product market combinations. And what I want to do is I want to use the correlation feature to identify the high risk audit unit. Now, this is the feature which Mr. Singhal spoke about, can be used at the planning stage. If you have a few hundred audit units and you want to identify certain high risk audit units at the planning stage of your internal audit, you could apply correlation. So we click on correlation. And what we are in a way trying to correlate, friends, is the ad spends with the revenue arising or attributable to the ad spend. So the two fields which are, collinear, they need to be checked together. And this would need to be generated for the audit unit field, which is the product market combination. So as I mentioned to you, I've taken data which is very, very small sample data for us to understand it. So there are 4 product market combinations. Now, the USP, friends, of correlation with an idea, because most of the time when correlation is applied, the score is generated at a global level for the entire data set. So it basically talks about total sales versus ad spends, at a global level, right? But what we can do now in correlation and idea is you can actually correlate it at a audit unit level, which is our product market combination. I remember using this actually for a very large tea garden in the northeast, where I actually correlated it, and the audit unit was my tea garden because we wanted to identify tea plucking in kilos coming down month-wise, whereas contract labor payments going up. And we actually identified in those tea gardens that there were payments being made to ghost contract labor lady employees because it was not commensurate with the tea plucking. Now we click on OK, friends, and you can actually see here, as I mentioned to you, you get a correlation score for each audit unit, and you can see here product A, market B, which is a particular combination, has a negative correlation of 0.93. Now let's see what this actually means. Okay, let me go into the data. I'm going to put a filter for product A, market B. So just like how you put an Excel filter, I'm putting a filter here. And now you'll notice the reason IDEA has detected this as a high risk audit unit out of four audit units, friends, is because look at the ad spends from week number 1 to week number 10. The ad spends are on a rise. Look at that. Look at the commensurate sales. The sales are on a fall, and a very high negative correlation indicates at a planning stage that look here, go and investigate this particular product market combination because there's something wrong with the efficacy of the ad program. It's not generating the revenue. And if you want to kind of present this to your top management saying that look here, we've identified certain concerning audit units, and you don't want to give it to them in the form of a table because you feel this may not fly with them, it may not be attractive enough, you can actually convert it to a chart. And this is something very nice which I like about IDEA, because you can toggle between tables and charts very easy. You can story tell with visuals very easy. And I'm actually going to say, give me the ad spend and the sale in units for product market A, and check this out. It's very interesting. Okay, you're going to see something really fun now. Take a look at that. Good stuff. So it's nice to show this to anyone who's going to review your work. Rather than put it as a table, you show it to them as a chart, and they will see the magnitude of what is hitting them right away. The blue bar, which is on a rise, is the ad spend. Okay, the green bar, which is the sale, is on a fall, and you can see it's in the form of an X, and this allows them to look at the seriousness of the issue, where they can question the efficacy of the ad program and maybe help identify certain red flags in through the correlation feature. And believe me, we've used this feature extensively, and we've come out with some fascinating insights. I remember, I cannot name the agency, but a leading auditor in the public space, a public auditor, actually applied this feature and idea on the midday meal program. And as you know, in the midday meal program, there is a fixed meal which is given to kids in various schools, and there they had to correlate monumental data. I mean, unbelievable. For a year, a few thousand schools across a state, I can't name the state, but they correlated the number of students enrolling with the midday meal spends which are given to the contractors who are tendered to take up midday mealing for that year. And they noticed that when students come down, the midday meal cost should come down, right? But they were actually going up. they were going up. And there was a lot of fabricated expenses. There were a lot of fake students shown to the accounting authorities, and they were claiming reimbursements. But that was detected with the help of correlation. So a very powerful feature, and helps you identify high risk audit units. Great. I'm happy we are looking at various case studies, and I'm sure you'll have lots of questions for both Mr. Singhal and me towards the end of the session. There's lots to cover, so hold on and stay till the end if you can. Now, we've looked at correlation, we've looked at discover, we've looked at working with sticky, unformatted, complex files. Now I would like to take up something which is like a pet subject for every internal auditor, and that is something which is, you know, out there. You talk about webinars, you talk about audits, you talk about probably talking about it in a classroom, something which we all love: duplicate vendor payments. No webinar is complete without demonstrating this feature, but I want to do a bit more of fun with this particular case study. I don't want to show you a simple duplicate, because I know all of you will say, hey, gone are the days where you can detect a simple duplicate, because there are a lot of controls in SAP and Oracle. I'm going to go a step ahead. So let me bring in the data first, friends. I'm importing an Excel file, and all right. Let me look for the file. I need to ensure I'm getting the right file in vendor bill passing. Okay, so it's an Excel file. Don't worry about this message which is flashing on your screen. This is only a preview limitation. For everyone's information, with IDEA, you can work with unlimited data. There's no limit on the size of the data. So this is only a preview limitation of this preview you see here on your screen. And I've got the data in. Now, this data is from SAP. So for all the participants online who work with SAP, you will immediately identify the field external document number is actually the vendor bill number, which is booked through FICO. Now, what I want to identify through the FICO module, what I want to identify is potential duplicates on the vendor number, the external document number, and the amount. So I'm looking for duplicates. But I know that a fraudster is smart. They are not going to book a bill with the same number, because they would not go past the booking stage thanks to the controls within the system. So what we do is, what the fraudster does is, they put in a special character, they may put in a space, they may give grammatical variations to sentence case, and just play around with the bill number. Now we are going to show you how you can detect such detractors in the bill number, which allows us to capture duplicate vendor invoices having spaces and special characters. So now the first thing we do, friends, is I'm going to add in a field in the data. Yes, you can add new fields into the data, but you cannot alter the existing data. And that's a very big advantage, because many data security organizations, right? There are many government organizations using IDEA, many defense organizations using IDEA. And for them, the point which is of paramount importance is, please tell me that this system cannot alter my underlying data. And that's the biggest assurance we can give to them. Your underlying data integrity is preserved and protected. So I'm going to give the field name as bill number. This is the vendor bill number, friends, stripped. Okay. Or let me use a word which is more positive. I'm sorry for that. Bill number cleaned. Okay. Now, because my original field is an alphanumeric reference, I will also call this an alphanumeric field. And the nice thing about IDEA is, there are a number of ready to use forensic data cleansing features. And one of them is a feature which is called @strip strip. Let me just zoom in, friends, so that you all can see it clearly. Give me a minute. Yes, strip. So now all of you have used trim in Excel, right? Now what trim does is, it gets rid of spaces. But what strip does is, it goes one step ahead. Not only does it remove spaces, it removes special characters in the data. So it leaves behind A to Z and 1 to 9. It leaves behind the letters and numbers, but removes everything else. Now imagine if you were to do this in a spreadsheet tool. you would have to use a find and replace for each special character. Look how cumbersome it is. Whereas here I'm getting rid of it all at one go, the strip command. Now you may probably raise a question that how do we learn these functions? Is there any show and tell which says, okay, this is the way to run the function, or how do we build the syntax of this function? The good thing is in the center of the screen here, you can expand the category on which you're applying the function. So we're dealing with the alphanumeric field, which is a character field. So we expand character, and then you go to strip, okay? And you can see it gives a write-up of the function. It gives you the syntax, and it also gives you an example at the bottom. So it allows you to learn, explore, and apply these functions without any challenge. Because the first thing, let me tell you, is when auditors think about tools, they say, oh, there's a lot of programming, coding. Let's say you call this a program, you call this a code, but there's a lot of easy help available which helps you write these systems. Now I'm going to use it along with the upper command to ensure all the letters are in the same grammatical sentence case. So I can use either upper, lower, proper, no problem. Now I'm going to run this on the field external document number. As all of you know, that is the bill number. Now the good thing, friends, is let's say I'm a real smart honcho on idea, I'm able to write this command, but my team members who are also going to be applying this kind of test need to use this in their audits. How do I save this? How do I share? How do I collaborate this gray cell content with everyone else? You just simply click on save, and that's it. I'm going to call it, let's say, bill clean equation. So just like how you save a Word file or an Excel file, this becomes a simple document which you can send by email to your colleague, and all they need to do is download it in their copy of IDEA and apply it. It's as easy as that. You can send it in by email, you can publish it to the cloud, because we have our own cloud share in IDEA where you can collaborate all of this across the cloud, across the country, across the globe, and you can receive it. Now let's run this, friends. And you can see we've got a new column. Let me show you the data. There, you can see it. You can see the original field here, and you can see the new field here. It's actually sanitized, it's cleaned the field. Now, the question comes is time to do the duplicate check, but time to do the duplicate not on the original SAP bill number, but on the field we've just cleaned up now. So we go to the duplicate command here, friends. There is a ready-made duplicate command. And this is one of the 100+ functions which is available in IDEA. And what are we looking for? We're looking to detect duplicates. So we use the option output duplicate records. And I am going to apply this. Now imagine, okay, I'm putting everyone who uses Excel on a spot here. If I want to do a duplicate in an Excel file on the field vendor number, bill number, and amount, what do? You do a concat, you concatenate the three fields. Now let's say it's a file of 1000 line items, you concatenate it, it's easy to do the duplicate check. But what happens if it's a file of 1,000,000 line items? One concat slows your entire worksheet down. Here, you don't need to do a concat. You can do a duplicate on 8 fields. So I take the vendor number, I take the amount, and I take bill number cleaned. So you can choose 8 fields. You can, on live data, you can take the purchase order number, you can take the location, you can take multiple fields so that you get a very precise, crisp list of potential duplicates. So I've taken the vendor number, amount, and bill number clean. Now friends, because my bill number also has blanks, if I do not exclude blanks, you're going to be stuck with a lot of false positives. So remember, a very valuable lesson while using IDEA for fraud analytics: as far as possible, deal with the false positives while you're building the analytics. Otherwise, you will spend more time validating data. It will defeat the purpose of the analytics. So a simple rule here: just go into the criteria, and put a simple command here saying bill number not equal to blank. Simple. That's it. This will save you a lot of headache at a later stage. You'll have to sift through a lot of blanks then to get the actual result. So just do this. And I don't want all fields. I want only certain fields to display. I want to keep it nice and neat and clean. Okay. All right. Now let's hit the run button. Okay, so we've got a list of duplicates. Now, friends, you'll notice something very interesting. My bill dump had 5,330 entries. After applying the duplicate, I've got 44 entries. Okay, so I'm really excited to see what the software is going to throw up. Okay, now I want all of you to look at line item 42, 43, and 44. Okay, check out 42, 43, 44. It is the same bill. It is the same vendor having the same amount. But look at the way the bill is being written. It's being written in different possible ways by the fraud perpetrator. But thanks to the strip command, we've been able to uniformize or standardize all the different conventions and create one common convention, and that's why this comes up as a duplicate. Now, this activity, friends, and I think this is the right time to introduce it. This activity is not only going to be important for you as an internal auditor and investigator. If you're a shared service center, if you're a controllership function, if you're an FP&A team, you are going to want to have access to this technique and technology, because you are going to be the first line of defense which is running this test, and you are going to want to have the technique to identify this duplicate before it lands up with the auditor and the auditor kind of red flags it. So now the nice thing is, there's this concept which you read about on the internet and which talks about transforming analytics to line functions. So the way, if you look at the growth of analytics, I'll just take a minute here. If you look at the growth of analytics within an organization, the onus of building, testing, managing, and running the analytics should not stay with auditors for the entire life cycle of the company. Certain low-hanging fruits. Now, this activity of duplicate vendor invoices, after a few cyclical runs, will become a low-hanging fruit because you will not get any duplicates, hopefully. That analytics should be transferred to the line function so that they can run it. They can take first line ownership for the activity. So now the question is, how do we, if they are also using IDEA, if they're using a different tool, it's a different animal altogether, but if they are also using IDEA and they want to gain access to your technique, the way you've gone about doing the duplicate. Okay, so you're basically collaborating with the auditees here. You're kind of giving them the gray cells. So what you can do is you can actually go into the audit trail. Okay, and I'm going to show you how you can automate this activity. I want to bring it in right now, right sometime in the midpoint of the training. So now what we want to do here is we want to identify how to automate this activity, right? So that anyone who needs to run a duplicate has access to the activity at the click of a button, and that can be done through a macro. So the macro or the automated report is something which is going to help you with repetitive analytics. So now this really cool looking kind of project overview with like sequence of tasks on the screen is called the project overview. This is the audit trail. It's the graphical audit trail. It is the reason why we use a tool for analytics, because it gives you a lot of information on what you've done. Now here, you basically click on create a macro. So everything I've done in the last half an hour is available at my fingertip. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the import of the bill passing file. I'm going to select the duplicate test, which I've done. So the entire activity, and maybe if you even export it to an Excel file as an annexure, that too will get recorded within a macro. Okay, so now I'm clicking on finish, and give me a minute. The macro should come up on my screen in some time. Okay, so you can actually see that is a macro. Now imagine this is one single red flag, friends. Imagine what Mr. Singhal put up on his slides. There were 25 to 30 red flags. Imagine all of them coming one below the other sequentially in a single macro. Will it not make your life easy? Will someone who's at the front line of detecting frauds not want to have this with them? So now here, I'm going to save this. Okay, I'm going to save this. I will call this, let's say, duplicate vendor invoice macro. Okay, so I'm giving it a suitable name. So my macro is saved, friends. And now what I'm going to do is just to show you how the macro runs, I'm going to delete the files which I created in my activity so that you can actually see how the macro runs. Now, the great thing about Idea Friends is till probably one version back, you had to run the macro manually, which meant that the user had to be seated on the system. It was like a force run through, and you had to ensure the data is in place. You had to ensure the PC is on an internet connection, etc., etc. Whereas now, you don't need to worry about that. You can run an unattended schedule run of the macro. So there is a task scheduler available within Idea. So you can schedule the macro, which means you may not be at your desk, right? Your machine may be in standby mode. All you need to do is the data from SAP on which you're going to run the duplicate needs to be downloaded and available in a folder, and then the macro will run. Now, how it runs is, I'm going to open the macro. I'm going to do a force run now, friends, because there are certain security settings on my laptop which are preventing me from doing a scheduled macro run. But if you go to YouTube, there are videos of how you can do a scheduled macro run in Idea. Let me open the duplicate vendor invoice macro. Okay, so that's the macro. And now all you need to do is click the run button. It's as easy as that. Take a look at that. So your entire activity of analytics from the start to the finish run on the vendor bill register, run on the FICO outlay, and it gives you a list of potential duplicates. Now imagine you are a professional services firm and you're hired by your client to build these macros for you and Idea and just give it to them. Look at the kind of, I'm just thinking aloud in terms of monetization. You can monetize the analytics. So not only can you use it to support the red flag initiatives of your company as an internal audit department, but if you're an external internal auditor, you can very well monetize the analytics. And this is a very big advantage of macros. So I have combined actually two features here, friends. I've combined on the vendor bill passing file how we can look for potential duplicates on the bill number along with automation of the activity through repetitive analytics. Now, I want us to have at least 15 minutes for Q&A. So I'm going to be taking the session. It's now 5:20 and I'm going to be taking it all the way up to 5:45. And then we'll have 15 minutes for Q&A so that lots of questions from yours can get answered. Now, moving forward, friends, we did the duplicate test, which was on the bill number, but it kind of was easy because the bill number was already cleaned, it was sanitized and cool to work with. But what if I have a field like an address? I have a description. I have a name where I want to look at potential matches on the name, potential matches on the address, and I want to do this at a pattern level, So let me tell you what I'm actually talking about. Let me first bring in the file. I'm going to be importing a master file. Okay. I need to locate the file. Give me a minute, friends. Yeah. So this is a master dump. Okay. Now, don't worry about the fields, but I'm basically going to talk about the field on which we want to do the duplicate check. Now, one of the biggest challenges is when you're doing an investigation. Let's say you want to identify related parties having a similar address. I remember we were doing a project for the financial intelligence unit in Idea a few years back, and we were studying money transfers from overseas into India through MoneyGram and Western Union money transfer. Now, you won't believe it, but those exchanges are used for narcotics and terror financing. And we noticed that in the money transfer data, there were addresses in a certain state in India. I wouldn't want to name the state, please, where the addresses were very similar and the money was coming into the same similar address in the same month. Now, normally, for those of you who work in the BFSI sector and you're familiar with money transfer applications, there is a purpose given for the transfer, and the purpose was family maintenance. Now, family maintenance, you'll have 12 family maintenance payments in a year, right? you can have multiple family maintenance transfers to the same address or the similar address in a month. And we noticed that because they were trying to bypass the monetary limit set by RBI. So we applied what we call as the fuzzy duplicate feature, which is like a pattern match on the address to identify similar addresses. Now, friends, let's get this, okay? It's easy to identify a similar name. It is not easy to identify a similar address. Address have far too many naming conventions. But IDEA's fuzzy duplicate is very powerful, and I want to show it to you. So we go into the duplicate test, but we're not going to do a plain duplicate like we did for the vendor invoice. We are going to be doing a fuzzy duplicate. Okay. Now, the nice thing about the fuzzy duplicate is it does not hard code the fuzzy algorithm and tell you that this is it, use it, get the result. It gives you, the user, it allows you to articulate and play around with the fuzzy similarity degree. I think that's a beautiful feature. Now let me show it to you. I am going to be doing a duplicate on the field mailing address because that is the field on which I want to look at, say, multiple entities registered to the same address, something out of a Jason Bourne movie. And I'm sorry, I need to add that in. And in terms of fields to display, I'm going to keep it simple. I'm just going to take agreement ID and customer relationship number, mailing address. I'm just going to keep it easy, okay? Now, the good thing here is you can determine the similarity degree based on your knowledge of the data. So let's say I keep the similarity degree at 95%. It will give me very few matches, but they would be very precise. The lower I bring the similarity degree on the fuzzy scale, which is the LUN algorithm, okay, the higher the detection rate, but also the higher positives. So I'm going to keep it now, let's say at 80%, okay. Let me see, I'm going to bring it to 75. I feel 75 is like my number for the evening today. And I'm going to click on run. Now let's see what happens, okay. Interesting. Now look at the data, okay. I want you to see the highlighted column on your screen, which is the mailing address, okay. Now you'll notice something very interesting. Not only are there grammatical variations of the address. So for example, you have SITALE, that is Sitlewadi, and SITALEE, Wadi, with a double I and a double E. Now that's a grammatical variation, but there are spelling mistakes. You've got Balkampet and Balgampet. These are very, very powerful advanced analytic algorithms working with an IDEA to deliver high quality analytics to you. This would not be possible in any other kind of conventional spreadsheet system. And the only reason I say this is because of the ability for you to set the similarity degree. Also, it's very, very fast. It's very fast. Now, you will wonder, okay, I've got this field, but now I want to show you something else. Next to the original mailing address, I'm also getting the group name. Take a look at that. So what it has done now, friends, is it's taken my original field and it's put one common address by the side. So now this is what we did in the financial intelligence unit when we were tracking the money transfers. We now have a common group name. So if I want to check for the same group name having multiple money transfers, multiple ID proofs, multiple mobile numbers, it becomes very easy. Why? Because I've got a common group name. This is the power of the fuzzy pattern when you're doing it. We work very closely with the Reserve Bank of India, and I mentioned this in all my webinars. RBI has a requirement in terms of borrower exposure. So if the borrower exposure crosses a particular monetary level, it has to be reported by the bank to RBI. Now, what the borrowers typically do is they register the name differently: allied agencies, allied brothers, allied traders, allied distributors. And now if they try to track it on the name, each of the names are different and they're going to be separate reporting entities and they're bypassing the group exposure norm. But the moment you apply the fuzzy duplicate, you've got a common name allied by the side of all. and then you can do the duplicate check. So it's a very, very powerful feature, fuzzy duplicates. Now, just as how, friends, we've done a fuzzy duplicate in one column, you can also do a fuzzy match across multiple columns. Now, this is very interesting. Okay, so now let me explain this test to you. We've got the approver name and the customer name. Okay, now these are two fields. So now the customer is, let's say, the entity to whom some financing has been done, and the approver name is the officer within the company who's approved the agreement. What I would like to check for is there any nexus between the customer and the approver? Now it's very easy. You can simply say Jairam is equal to Jairam. We're not talking about that kind of utopian situation. We're talking about a case where Jairam with a Jairam as a borrower is equal to Jayyaram as an approver. The names are different. So earlier on, where we looked at the fuzzy within a column, now we're looking at a fuzzy across columns. It's very interesting. Now, friends, before I actually show this to you, I want to introduce you to a feature in IDEA which is called Passport. Now, the Passport is basically a support portal for IDEA users. Now, I know I'm not supposed to be hard selling anything here, but it's related to the topic and hence allow me that liberty. Now, when you click on Passport, it basically opens up a support portal where, as an IDEA user, you can actually log in and gain access to a wealth of information. So there are a lot of free webinars, user guides, scripts, custom functions, Python scripts, videos, import components, lots of it. Also access to AuditNet Premium, which is the repository of internal audit checklists. Now, when you log into Passport, and I'm doing that at the moment, you can actually see here, you've got something here called the script vault. Okay, so when you go into the script vault, it gives you a list of all the scripts which are available for use, and there are a few hundred scripts there. And why I'm showing this to you, friends, is because many of the scripts which we use, like for example, cross join, right? Or let me come down, give me a minute. All the scripts are available here and ready to use. You can see, like, there is a requirement where I have 100 PDF files and I want to import all of them at one shot and combine them into a database. I can do that through a script which is available here. So there are a number of unique situations which require us to use this feature. Now you can see you've got the relative size factor. I'm going to be covering that in some time. The same different test. So there are a number of repository of these scripts, and one of the scripts which I'm going to be using is a script called the fuzzy join. So I'm sorry, here I'm going to be using the sounds like command. It's already available in IDEA, but there's also a fuzzy join script which I'm going to be showing to you a bit later. So now how we do that is we basically apply an extraction on the data, friends. Okay, and I am going to call this related party entry. Okay. Now, you remember I used the strip command, which allows you to remove spaces and characters when I did the duplicate vendor invoice check. Just like that, there is a command in IDEA called sounds like. Okay. Now, what sounds like does is it allows you to do a pattern match on two fields which are in the same database. So in our case, it allows me to map the customer name with the approver name. It's really cool. So it does a pattern match between two names in the same data. And what I was actually planning to show you through the Passport feature is a function called fuzzy join, right? Which is also available in IDEA Lab, which can be used to do a pattern match across files. So sounds like is within the same file and fuzzy join is across files. So we run this. And let me only show you certain fields so that you don't need to deal with the other fields. check this out, friends. It's very, very interesting. Look at that. So just like how we got similar names, within the same column when we did the fuzzy duplicate check, friends, here we are getting similar names across columns. And check it out. Srinivasan with the E, Srinivasan with the I, Dhruvyajyoti with the I, Dhruvyajyot. So these kind of potential matches are possible. And friends, these all qualify as advanced analytics. A lot of this are not possible in mainstream spreadsheets. Right? You need to build special Excel utilities, Access utilities. You need to write very cumbersome SQL commands, and I don't know about the accuracy of the results. Whereas here, it's very, very quick and doable. So just like how we looked at the fuzzy duplicate, you now have the fuzzy extraction match within the same file. Now, friends, let me import a file which is, give me a minute. I think we can use the sales file itself. Okay. So the sales file which I brought in right in the beginning, if you remember, on which we did the discover test to identify pre-built red flags like the ready-made duplicates and such. We are going to be working on the sales file. Now, I want to show to you the relative size factor test. Now, as all of you who have attended the FAFD course of the Institute, or you are forensic aficionados, you are familiar with RSF. So RSF basically is the ratio of the highest to the next highest value per reporting entity. So in our case, if I look at customer sales to customers, it's the ratio of the highest sale to the next highest sale per customer. And if that ratio kind of is very, very large, it kind of tells, or it kind of indicates some kind of maybe like a fabricated arrangement, or some kind of like money laundering, or some kind of book entry in the data. So like typically if I'm, let's say, selling a particular product to a customer, and my highest sale is $1 million and the next highest is 0.8 million, it's within a matching range, right? It's within striking distance. But if I say I do a 1 million to the customer and then I do a 1,000, that's a huge outlier range. So it's very interesting. Here, the RSF test is a ready script which you can download from Passport. So Passport is the support portal. You go in there, bam, you're a registered user, log in, pick up the test, download it, drop it into IDEA. And now this is how it works. You open the script through macros. Now these are macros which you don't need to record, because you've got a wonderful development team which has recorded it in Canada and has made it available for us. We just pick up the relative size factor test, open it, and you can see this is the macro. Now don't worry about reading too much into the logic, the syntax. Don't worry about that. All you need to know is this macro is available for you to use. So you click on the run button here. You can see there's a run script button. You just run it. And I love the scripts in Passport, because while the script looks kind of menacing with a lot of code and it may scare auditors away, when you run the script, it gives you a dialog box which is beautiful. I mean, it's so easy to work. You need to choose the file. So I click on select database. I choose the file. And in a nice, easy going way, you can pick the fields of your choice. Field to run the test on, customer number, optional description field. Now it's like a field to display by customer number. Now if you had the name, you could choose customer name, but I don't have the name. So just to complete the test, I'm going to say product code. Now the field on which you want to do the RSF, this is interesting. So the field with amount is going to be sales plus tax. So that's it. You just choose these fields, click on OK, and the RSF will run, and it gives you the top high outlier RSFs within the data. Look at that. So it's showing you customer 10201. Look at the spread between the highest sale and the next highest sale. Look at 30501. Look at 40100. These are the customers on whom you can focus your attention, because the spread between the highest sale and the next highest sale is very significant. Now imagine if you do this in stock market operations. You look at the transactions before a record date, look at the transactions on a script after the record date, and if the spread in the two transactions are very significant, which is indicated by the RSF, it could indicate insider trading. So RSF has multiple applications. What is nice is you don't need to build it. You don't need to build it. You've got the solution ready. You just need to deploy it, and it gives you a list of RSFs you need to focus on. Now, friends, I just want to take up two more functions before we get into Q&A. I wanted to save the best for last. Something which Mr. Singhal spoke about in his presentation, which is the most beloved and the most talked about functionality in forensic investigations and fraud analytics, and that is Benford's law. So let me import the data, please. And I'm going to do it on a payments database because that is where you see the best usage of Benford's law. So now let me locate the file, sample file for Benford law. Okay. I'm also going to bring in the release limits file by the side because we're going to need that. So friends, this is a vendor payments ledger, which has payments to vendors on different dates against different bills. My objective or the purpose I want to run Benford's law is I want to do an exploratory analytic to identify if there's any splitting or skimming taking place. Now, most of us are aware of the Benford first digit test or the popular second digit test, but we've introduced in Caseware the last two digits test. So I'm going to do something different this time. I'm going to apply Benford's law on the field amount. As all of you know, it needs to be applied on a field which is not a pre-formatted number like a check number or a bill number. It needs to be on a random number without any artificial minimum maximum, so the vendor payment amount qualifies. And I'm going to be running that, friends, on the last two digits test. Now you notice when I say last two digits, it's showing it's a suspicious test, so it's rather interesting. And because my data is a smaller file, I need to give a ceiling limit here. So I say run it on 100 records and run it on the last two integers. Otherwise, it'll run on the decimals, which we don't want. So this is a small change you need to make in the advanced property settings. And now when you run the test, friends, I love the fact that it gives you a beautiful visual representation of all the suspicious payments. Now, look at this payment smack in the center here, friends. Now, the reason this is a suspicious payment is this payment ends with 49. So now if I go and I drill down into the suspicious payment, okay, give me a minute. All right, where's the amount? Hang on, let me, can I hide fields here? I don't think I can do that, but can I move fields to the right? I could do that, that's great. Okay, so check this out, friends. There's a payment made to a company, Fossil Incorporated. Now one would wonder, why is this a suspicious payment? I mean, okay, it ends with 49, but much ado about nothing. That's fine, there's nothing great about it. But what is interesting, a same supplier, okay, payment on the same date against the same purchase order, running check number and same approver. That's why it rings a number of bells. It kind of 360-degree profiling, it kind of hits all those buttons which kind of signify it's a split payment. Now, if you're still not convinced, if you add these two payments up, okay, now 95 and 68 is roughly a lakh and 65. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not going to go down to the last integer. It's a lakh and 65 approved by HMV. Now, take a look at this. If I open the release limits file, where is the release limits file? Yes. Okay. And look at HMV's release limit. HMV is allowed to release payments up to a lakh of rupees. Now, if you go to that particular payment to Fossil, both the payments are below 1 lakh. So at an individual line item level, there's no splitting. But when you accumulate it together and compare it to 1 lakh, it's definitely a case of splitting. What is also nice is we've got a payment right at the end here, which is ending with 99, and that is also a suspicious payment. And you can see why. Multiple payments made to a company, McKinsey Petroleum, and you can see the amounts are all ending with 99. So it's a very nice. I know that there is a school of thought which says that a lot of work still needs to be done on the Benford law after the findings are released, but it's a very good initial red flag representation activity, and it kind of allows you to prove or disprove certain suspect payments. So friends, it's been a wonderful session, but I have one last case study which I want to show to all of you before we get into Q&A, and that will allow me to complete my session in time by 5:45. There's a very useful component and idea called the Smart Analyzer. Now, the Smart Analyzer is basically a compendium of ready-made tests for accounts payable, receivable, fixed assets, inventory, payroll, GL, which someone's taken the effort to develop the test and give it to us, and we just need to deploy the tests. So now let me run the Smart Analyzer test on a general ledger and show you how it works. Okay, so I have a general ledger with me. Okay, so a classic general ledger packed with journal vouchers on different dates, accrual entries, prepaid entries, all of that. Now, what I want to do is I want to deploy the Smart Analyzer on the general ledger file, and I want to use some of the ready-made GL based analytics which will ensure uniform, consistent, high quality audit reporting. Rather than have an auditor use their judgment, let the tool use its judgment, a standard way of doing it. So here it starts by first tagging the data. So you need to link your data to the Smart Analyzer, and look at this. The tool is very, very intuitive because it identifies that you're doing the analysis on a general ledger. So it clicks on, it gives you that pop-up. And here what we need to do is you need to do a one-time tagging of the field, which means your client GL is to be linked to the Smart Analyzer GL tag. So here, amount, you can see I'm doing the tagging, comment, description, customer code, account number, customer name, account description. Now I'm going to segue away from some of these fields. Journal entry number, JE number, journal entry source code, source. So you can actually do this tagging. It's very quick. All you need to do is link your data to the Smart Analyzer data, apply, run. So now the tagging is done. Okay, now there's a one-time job of tagging the ledger to Smart Analyzer, and then all you need to do is click on select and run. So when you click on select and run, it will show you all the analytics available. You can see a number of analytics are available here. I'm going to specifically talk about the GL analytics. Now, the reason I'm taking this up is because I want to show you the anti-bribery corruption analytics here. So you see an activity here, journal entries with specific comments. So I click on the status here, friends, and I say input required. So what I'm doing is I'm telling the software, look for the narration containing certain words. So I'm going to add the words in gift, donation. So all the words which kind of are central to anti-bribery corruption, suspense. You can add any number of words. So you just keep adding them in here. And then you can see the test is ready to run. You just click on run, and that's it. The test is running. I'm just showing you one test, friends, because of paucity of time, but there are many of these tests available for different operating units. And now if you actually see, the results have come within the screen here, showing you the journal entries. You can see that. So it's showing donations to soccer club, birthday gift. These are kind of personal expenses which have been routed through the business books of accounts. So this is Smart Analyzer, a very, very powerful tool and a very recent introduction by Caseware into IDEA, and it's available to IDEA users. So friends, true to my commitment to all of you, it's 5:45, pardon me. and I am ending my presentation here. I hand over the session to Menas for any questions which you all have for Deepji, Mr. Deepji Singhal and me, and we'll be happy to take it up. Thank you.
So it is said that can we say fraud analytics is a preventive step and for fraud investigation as detective one?
So I'll read out the question. It's from Mr. Rakesh. Can we say fraud analytics is a preventive step and fraud investigation is a detective one? Sure,
I
sir.
think it's not fraud analytics need not necessarily be preventive, because while you are carrying out fraud analytics, you may detect some wrongdoings and fraud may already have occurred, and then also it is possible that it may be detected while doing fraud analytics.
Okay, over to the next question. Now moving to the next
Sure, sir.
question from Mr. Rakesh again. How is the case study different from the text to column feature in Excel? You can use the delimited option in Excel as well. So I think he's referring to the very first case study on the weblog where the data was in a scrambled manner, and we use the reporter to convert it into structured columns. So Mr. Rakesh, there I agree with you. If it's a text file, you can use text to columns and convert it. But what if that same file were in a PDF format? So you would not be able to use the text to columns on a PDF file. So this feature of floating layers is applicable to PDF files, HTML files, complex report files where you cannot do a text to columns in Excel. So it has that added benefit. A quick question from Mr. Kiran Kumar. The command or syntax sounds like, is it R? Mr. Kiran Kumar, I think you are asking, is it similar to the R, like a code in the R language? It may be because a lot of this has seed in a common logical analytic toolkit. But this is, the syntax is very specific to IDEA. The sounds like command, maybe conceptually you link two names, even in R you do the same, but the syntax is very, very specific to IDEA, where we say link name one to name two. There's a question from Lavmeet Dua. Can we use the get next value or the get previous value for bringing the immediate next or previous values in front of the baseline? But how do we bring the third line in front of the baseline? So you can just write into us with that question, Lavmeet. There is a new enhancement in the IDEA lab called get next, get previous. And that would be a very convenient way to bring in multiple lines by the side of the baseline. So you can write into us and we'll be happy to guide you on that. Amish has a question. What is the upper limit of number of records IDEA can handle? So Amish, technically you cannot exceed the hard disk on the machine. But that being said, you can work with large databases. There is no limitation. But one thing you need to keep in mind, and I like to mention this here, when you're working with large databases, a pre-sorted database always processes faster than IDEA. So if you're doing a duplicate on a master file which has say 100 million line items, and you're doing a duplicate on the PAN, it is preferable and suggested to sort the PAN first and then do the duplicate. It kind of brings down the throughput time on the duplicate. Tahir has a question. Can we do an analysis of email dumps from G Suite like PST or CST dumps and get exceptions like email sent to a particular person? So Tahir, I have personally not tried it out, but at a logical level, if you can convert those email logs into a report file, and those report files can be converted into IDEA like the way we did it with the weblog, and you get the recipient name, date, timestamp, etc., etc., then yes, we could identify emails sent to particular individuals. Lijo has a question on the CIDA certification. Lijo, if you can write into us, the CIDA certification is a course where IDEA users who want to demonstrate additional competency and proficiency in the use of IDEA can get certified as certified IDEA data analysts. But there's a process, there's a roadmap to be taken to get CIDA certified. So Lijo, you can write into us at info@samaorder.com and we would be happy to guide you on the process. Utsav has questions on how to learn IDEA. I think if I have a minute, I can just show to you. We have the SAMA Learning Center. This is one of the mediums through which you can learn IDEA. And the SAMA Learning Center, we have multiple skill set levels to learn IDEA. There's introductory training, there's advanced training, there's fraud analytics training. So Utsav, to answer your question specifically and other members online who would want to know about that, these are 30-day e-learning pre-recorded videos with, you get a 30-day copy of IDEA. There are self-practice tutorials, MCQs, many hours of pre-recorded videos. You get a certificate at the end. So you can start with level 1, that is 101, then move to 102, and finally move to fraud analytics, which is the third level. So this is a very good way to, learn IDEA during the pandemic when you are probably working safely from home. Just give me a minute, please. I'll go back to IDEA. Okay, I'm taking the last few questions. To what extent internal auditors will be responsible I'm not able to follow this. To what extent are internal auditors responsible when they fail to detect a fraud?
I think I'll take that one on.
Sure.
I think as has been laid out in the pronouncements of IIA and others, internal auditors are directly not responsible to detect the frauds, because the management is responsible to detect frauds, and that's the first line of defense. But I think if you have carried out internal audit, the question that you have phrased it, if you have carried out internal audit and then failed to detect a fraud in the area where you had carried out a process audit or carried out an audit of an area, then I think it looked very badly on the internal audit. And then the audit committee or the management would certainly like to ask, what was your audit methodology? What were your audit tests? What was the sample size, or what was the audit universe in that particular area? How much data was crunched? Why did an internal audit fail to detect a fraud? So I think that's always a lot of discomfort to the internal auditor in case you carry out an audit in a particular area and then fail to detect a fraud, which would, with proper diligent competent work in that area, a normal average internal auditor would have been able to detect a fraud. So I think, or see the red flag. So it becomes difficult to explain to management or the stakeholder why you have failed to detect a fraud. I have seen two cases in the country which I cannot disclose, but where an internal auditor carried out work in a particular area, failed to detect a fraud, and then there was a huge loss to the company, and the company is planning to take the internal auditor to court, sue the internal auditor per se. So I think that may create a lot of difficulties for the internal auditor.
A couple of more questions and I'll try to wrap it up quickly. There's a question, does IDEA use more of Excel based analytics or SQL based analytics, from Raghuraman? I think IDEA has its own proprietary analytic engine, and that's why you see the discover feature. That is a measure of IDEA's proprietary analytic engine. That being said, if you are familiar with Excel and SQL, your transition to IDEA will be that much more easier because it's very logical. Finally, they all are analytic tools. There's a question from a few members. Can we get a limited validity trial version of IDEA for IIA members? All I can probably say is, as I mentioned to you in also the e-learning course which we have, which is a very formalized way to learn the tool, gives you access to a 30-day fully functional version of IDEA. Okay, so if you subscribe to that e-learning course directly online, it's very seamless. You can go and do it online itself. You will get a 30-day license, and you can use that not only to learn IDEA, to upskill, but you can use it for engagements and evaluating the tool at the same time. Is there any possibility to review voice recordings through IDEA? Well, not at the moment, Tapan, but there's a lot of innovation happening in Canada, and a lot of innovation in terms of OCR based analytics. So we'll see. There would be a lot of innovation coming through, but not at the moment. Are fraud schemes readily available like you demonstrated for GL fraud analytics. So Mr. Manish Kakkar, I think there are a lot of ready-made control and fraud scenarios in Smart Analyzer, but there are no ready-made fraud macros in IDEA. A lot of them will have to be built by you. But that being said, as I mentioned, there are 100+ functions. We've seen about a dozen of them this evening in the demonstration, and those can be used to build the specific fraud macros. There are some questions on how IDEA is superior than IDEA 11.1 is superior than earlier versions of IDEA. Once again, for all of you who have that question, you can go to the SAMA website. That's the last question. And if you go to software solutions and you go to IDEA, there is an enhancements feature here, which will basically list out what are the enhancements in IDEA over earlier versions. Okay, so the question was specifically on 11.1. So there's a tab here on what's new on IDEA 11.1, which talks about the enhancement of IDEA. So thank you. Those were the questions, and I hand it over to Mehnaz. Thank you.